One of the most important achievements of socialist revolutions across the world was the improvement of women's rights. This was true in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and the Americas, where socialist revolutions led to the liberation of women from the patriarchal social orders which had held them down for centuries. Fascist takeovers, by contrast, led to the regression of women's rights. This means that women lost rights that they had previously had. All fascist dictatorships were traditional patriarchies, where women were seen as inferior to men. So to make it simple, socialist revolutions were good for women, whilst fascist counter-revolutions were bad for women. Now in this video I will be focusing on 5 states in particular: the USSR, which goes without saying, and the People's Republic of China, the 2 largest socialist states in history. On the fascist side, I will be focusing on Fascist Italy, the Third Reich, and of course, Franco Spain. Under the Tsar, Russian women were bound to the will of their husbands, who had the backing of the state, as well as the Russian Orthodox Church. Indeed, a woman needed permission from her husband to work, was forced to live in the residence of her husband's choosing, which meant that if she fled the family home, her husband had the right to request the state's help in order to retrieve and punish her. This was a system that affected women of all classes. Although the aristocratic women were better off since they could afford to get divorced as well as get an education, they were still bound to the will of their husbands, just like the peasant and working class women who were at the bottom of society. This of course changed with the October Revolution of 1917, which brought the Bolsheviks to power. Under communism, women had the ability to hold public office, receive a good education, and, most importantly, women were no longer under the control of their husbands, which meant that they had control of their own destiny. So Russia went from being the most oppressive European nation when it came to women's rights to the most progressive. Indeed, by the 1930s, the Soviet Union was producing female engineers, lawyers, doctors, and pilots. Furthermore, women also served in leadership roles, something that was basically unheard of at the time.
To produce engineers and technicians for the new society, training was expanded. And the communists said women should have equality with men, with equal pay. Ella Shishtir was one of a new generation of women.
Когда Ленин сказал, стране нужна электрификация, а коммунизм это советская...
When Lenin said that communism is Soviet power plus electrification, I decided that I should become an electrical engineer, that was my holy duty. And I didn't want to just draw up plans, I wanted to build an electric power station. That was my mission, and I achieved it.
Она давала мне...
The revolution gave me the right to feel equal to any man. It gave me the right to work, to study what I wanted to study.
Она давала мне право трудиться, учиться так, как я хочу.
This was guaranteed by the Soviet Constitution of 1936, where women were declared to be equal to men. This is not to say everything was perfect for women. For example, in the same year the 1936 Constitution was enacted, abortion was recriminalized in order to boost the population. This of course violated the rights of women. However, if you compare the USSR with the rest of Europe at the time, they were very progressive, especially when it came to the rights of poor and working class women. Meanwhile, in the fascist states, quotas were not only set to keep women out of work and university, but there were also laws enacted that were designed to purge women from professional jobs. For example, in Nazi Germany, a decree in 1936 led to the mass sacking of married female judges, public prosecutors, and civil servants. Furthermore, the quota on university places for women resulted in the number of students falling from 18,000 to around 5,000. Therefore, under the Nazis, women only made up 13% of all German university students. In Britain it was 26%, whilst in the USSR it was 38%. Women were also discriminated against in other areas. For example, the semi-feudal Reich Hereditary Farm Law of 1933 declared that the firstborn son of a farmer would always be first in line to inherit the private farm. If a farmer only had female children, the land would then pass to the farmer's male sibling or a nephew. You can see that in the education and economic fields, women were greatly discriminated against. The role of the woman in fascist society was to be a mother and a homemaker. This was stated by Hitler himself.
Die Frau hat auch ihr Schlachtfeld. Mit jedem Kind, das sie der Nation zur Welt bringt, kämpft sie diesen Kampf durch. Das ist ihr Kampf für die Nation und der Mann hat seinen Kampf. Der Mann tritt für das Volk ein, genauso wie die Frau für die Familie eintritt. Der Mann tritt für die Gesamtheit der Volksgenossen ein, genauso wie die Frau eintritt für die Kinder, denen sie selbst das Leben schenkt.
So whilst women were becoming engineers, lawyers and professors in the USSR, they were being told to stay at home in Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. A clear difference between progress under socialism and regression under fascism. Now you will find that this trend continued after the Second World War. In fascist Spain, women were classified as minors who were under the guardianship of their husbands. They had no legal authority over their children, nor had equal rights to joint property. Furthermore, women were imprisoned for committing adultery. Men who committed the same offence, by contrast, were not jailed. Franco even legalized honor killings, where it was legal for the head of the household to kill his wife or his daughter if he felt that she had dishonored him or the family name. Of course, most of you would know that Franco's regime was backed by the West because he was a fellow anti-communist. In fact, fascist Spain was admitted into the UN in the 1950s, whilst the People's Republic of China was barred till the 1970s. This is shameful because the Chinese communists had greatly improved the status of women.
Women were given new rights at work and in marriage. The painful tradition of foot binding was abolished, and women were helped in the drive to end illiteracy.
Gender equality was guaranteed by both the marriage law of 1950 as well as the Chinese constitution. Child marriages were abolished, as were arranged marriages, and other relics of the old patriarchal Confucian system that had dominated China for hundreds of years. Indeed, as the Indo-British journalist Frank Moraes observed, China had advanced several centuries due to these reforms. In my opinion, China was also several centuries ahead of Franco Spain, who was shamefully propped up by the West. Now there are plenty of other examples I could talk about, such as the communist government in Afghanistan attempting to liberate women from theocracy, or how Thomas Sankara ended genital mutilation in Burkina Faso. Women's liberation has always been an important part of socialist revolutions. That is one of the reasons why reactionary fascist movements support the restoration of the patriarchy.